Hello and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Eddie Pauline, a member of the Columbus Metropolitan Club's Board of Trustees and serve as the Director of Economic Engagement at The Ohio State University. When I say it's great to see you today, it is really great to see people back in this room. This has obviously been a disruptive time, and we all need social interaction, and we're glad to get a piece of that today. And we hope at some point we can convene back as a larger group. Let's welcome several new CMC members today. Brian McMichael of the OSU Wexner Medical Center, K.L. Allen with Western Governors University, and our newest lifetime member, Jessica Hamlin with Health Markets and Ascend Media Matters. Thank you for your membership. Over the past several weeks, racism and systematic bias is being acknowledged as never before, and there seems to be a strong momentum for real change. In our long-standing tradition, and for as long as it takes, CMC will work to develop forums that provide community space to explore these issues in our new series, Racism, Where Do We Go From Here? You can learn more about CMC, register for events, join CMC, renew your membership, or make a donation anytime at columbusmetroclub.org. Today's forum, Young Black Men Speak, is live streamed thanks to our live stream partners, WOSU Public Media, Dispatch Media Group, and PNC. We'd also like to thank all of you who purchased a virtual seat today. We are very grateful for this support and are able to continue live streaming services in large part because of you. Thank you. Complicated and complex, resolving the many issues of racism is an urgent task. People of all colors and backgrounds are engaged in demands for greater equity and justice. To begin to understand the challenges, listening to those whose daily lives are shadowed by racism is a reasonable place to start, and where we will start today. What does life look like day to day for a young African-American man? We are pleased to welcome three exemplary young leaders for a glimpse. Please welcome Michael Bivens, Andrew Pierce II, and Playon Patrick will lead the conversation. Playon, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much for allowing me to host today's forum with such important voices to be heard. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to CMC's Forum on Young Black Men. Guys, I'm going to jump off with the first question. So America has used policing and incarceration as a form to control the black community. What systemic changes do you think we can make, if any, to fix the broken system?
Well, first and foremost, I would like to say thank you all for having me. But when every question that I answer, I'm going to honestly answer from my heart. Do not look at my parents. Do not look at nothing. This is coming from me. But this question actually has two parts. The first part would be police officers they apply for their job and they go through the training and everything, and then they become police officers. The question that we need to ask them are, why do they want to become a police officer? And why do they want to police in certain neighborhoods? Because I just truly, in my heart, I feel like an officer from Heath should not come into inner city Columbus and police an urban environment. The second part to that question, we are the people that elect these judges and the prosecutors. So we have to look at their temperaments. We need to look at what are their views to sentencing, and that's how we change the system, by putting the right people in place to make change.
I definitely agree with that. You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Mr. Bivens said, and also want to thank you all for having me here. Looking at our criminal justice system, I mean, we need to look at it holistically and strategically and see how it controls the black community, right? So if we're looking at policing and incarceration, let's look at incarceration for a second. Why is it that incarceration is used to control the black community? Well, how do you control a community, right? Politically, let's look at how if you're incarcerated, if you have a felony on your record, you can't vote, right? If you're on parole or probation, you can't vote, right? So how many of us saw the Rayshard Brooks funeral yesterday, right? one of the things that struck out to me what that pastor said was that 1 in 18 Georgians are on parole or probation. And with that incarceration on your record, how does that really control your future and how your destiny, how you can really build your community, right? If I can't get a job, I can't put financial independence into my community. If I can't own a lease, I can't have financial ownership in my community, right? So all this incarceration builds back into how we're really oppressing the Black community, right? And looking at our officers that are coming into our community and policing us, saying, okay, if I don't know you, if you're from like Heath and I'm in Linden, I don't know who you are, right? So there's already a disconnect there between our police officers and our communities that they're supposed to be protecting.
Yeah, so we need to be establishing a more connect, approach with the police officers in our community. Definitely, but how do you think Black men are viewed in America today?
So it all goes back to media, right? So America, we're the media power of the world, and how we reflect ourselves as a country in our media shows how we view certain groups, right? So for example, Black men, you're either seen as a LeBron, as an athlete, you're either seen as a rapper, a Meek Mill, or you're a thug, right? Or you're a Black exception, right? In that a Black exception, someone who's in a suit, right, at a college, right? You see them, they're an exception, they're rare. They're not really what Black men are supposed to be like.
Exactly.
Right? You're 21, you don't have any kids?
Exactly.
You're like, what? Like, and I've gotten those questions before on campus, of course. So media plays a huge role in how we're viewed as Black men in America, of course.
Exactly. 100% would like to agree with what you said. That's actually very powerful. From this, I can't really give a generic view because I cannot speak for every Black man in America. But as you all see, I'm sitting here, I'm 220 pounds, African-American male, standing at 6 foot. And it's really just how you look at things. I could come off aggressive if you do not know me. If you do, I promise you, if you get to know me, I'm actually probably the most funniest person you'll ever meet in your life. I love cracking jokes. I love just having a good time. But when it goes down to when I'm walking up the street and a group, well, people that do not look like me have to cross the street just based upon how they view me, and I'm just walking up the street minding my business, it goes to show that they view as like aggressive. They might view me as a threat. So it just goes upon how can we really change that at some point. So, but yeah, I feel like that's how it's viewed.
Yeah, that negative portrayal definitely leads to a negative perception and then negative outcomes. But when you look at the climate in America today, you have the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, and so many others. Why do you think white Americans fear young Black men?
It's ingrained into American culture, right? So if we look at my people struggle in this nation, we came over here, let's say 1619, for 300, 400 years, my people were seen as less than human, right? Let's take it further. For the past only 50, 60 years, I've been recognized as a full citizen, being given the right to vote, being given to go into any public space that I want to go into, right? So it's ingrained into the very fabric of America. So when we look at generations and looking at generational trauma and how we can pass on that trauma from slavery, right? I truly believe that you're also passing on that prejudice and that racism from the other side, right? So you may love my music, you may love my movies, you may love my basketball shoes, but let me actually talk to you. You really don't want to get to know me. You love the idea of me, but you don't love me.
Exactly.
That's why Black America fears the Black man.
I'm going to answer that question with a question. First and foremost, I just have the question, I'm going to place out a group. Do racist white Americans, do they fear Black people or do they hate Black people? Because there's a difference because if you fear something, you avoid it at all costs. You stay away. You don't even try to mess with it. But if you hate something, you do everything in your power to destroy it. You do everything to try to kill it. And you try to nullify that whole entire description, the whole power aspect of things. So, but I'll give you an answer. The reason why they fear Black America is because they do not want to share the power. Based upon everything in America, it's always about who has the most power. And whoever has the power, they're in charge. So why would they want to share that with the people that can make the change? So There we go.
Definitely power. Yes, sir. If you want to keep going, though, what policies or reforms can police departments implement to see change in our communities?
Oh, I got something for that.
Say
I got something.
Go on. Go on.
First and foremost, the policies that should be implemented are hold our police accountable for their actions, first off. But then also, I feel like there should be a policy on, let's just start right here. Let's have a policy on not killing black people.
Yeah.
And let's see how that changes. Because I just feel like death should not be the first resort to everything. Because honestly, you can go through every story in the book. Unarmed black man. Why is he being shot? Why is he a threat? You have the power. You have the gun in your hand. He has nothing. A black man is running away from the police. Why are there bullets put into his back? Does that make any sense at all? And even all of these crimes and everything like that, if they go to trial, they would not end up being the death penalty. So it just blows my mind about how that really can be torn and twisted into you just lost a life, and then the police go on trial and nothing happens. It just blows my mind to this day.
I agree with that and completely, but also holding our police accountable, putting in systematic practices and policies to actually police the police, right? So for example, if you shoot someone like Ahmaud Arbery or Rashard Brooks or George Floyd, I'm not gonna have that local police department investigate themselves. Because just human nature, if my brother commits a crime, yeah, I have a conflict of interest right there in prosecuting my own brother, right? So bringing in independent investigators, independent agencies to actually investigate these crimes of killing innocent black men, but also looking at the society and the culture of that police department, right? If this, let's take Columbus, for example. We live in a minority majority city, right? We have our Bhutanese community, our Somali community, our black community, but yet and still we have a police department with 87% white officers, right? So let's look at how we're systematically recruiting these police officers to actually police and provide security for our communities, right? Are we building partnerships with our Columbus City schools to say, okay, Fort Hays, okay, Columbus Downtown, I may teach you how to be a hairdresser, I may teach you how to be a cook, but no, let me teach you how to be a police officer, right? Let me teach you how to actually build your community. We don't want to just box our youth into certain holes and tell them that, no, this is what you're going to be. No, let's say, what can you be, right? Bringing in minorities to police our communities, but also within that, funding certain initiatives within the police department to promote community trust and community accountability, right? So if I just see a cop rolling around a patrol car 24/7, yeah, I don't know you. All I see of you is just, yeah, shooting me in the back, right? But let me tell you something. Let's say if you're on a bike, right, and I know you, right? Mike, we went to high school together. You on the bike, right? Like, okay, cool, like I know him. We need to actually systematically use these funds that were given to our police, use them smartly, strategically, and to build community trust. That's how you really reform a police department.
Also, one more thing. And even if somebody in the room knows the chief, there should be implemented a 6 months on the street, 6 months off the street. Because the thing about it is, just like what you said, if they build that relationship, it's all about relationship. Because first and foremost, the police system is not implemented. It's a public service. It isn't implemented to be fear. It isn't implemented to be like you're supposed to protect and serve. So by that aspect, you have to trust. It's all about trust. So that really should be implemented. 6 months on the street, 6 months off the street.
And building cultural competency along with that, right? So let's say you are that cop from Heath,
Right.
that came into Columbus. I need to make sure that you know, yeah, a Linden is very different than a Westerville, right? A New Albany is a very different than East Side, right? So making sure that our officers know those 6 months on the street, I'm getting to actually know the community that I'm actually within, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think those checks and balances are so important when we're talking about the police and our nation in general. Just we need to be having things balancing each other out so we don't have this, overflow of prejudice or racism or anything, blocking our systems. But the next question is, how have race and other forms of oppression been used to limit the growth of the black community?
I got this one.
Oh, no, go on. I got it too.
First and foremost, if you're from Columbus, does anybody remember Old Town East? Gentrification. We're gonna go down into that, and we're just gonna. That's one really big that I've seen in Columbus is gentrification. Another is redlining. You can go into redlining. You can see a Jamal Henry and then you can see, let's give me a name, Jim, something else. Just think about somebody who does not look like me last name. So think about it like this, and let's implement how we cross off Jamal based upon his name. That happens every single day in America. And the thing about it is, my name might be Michael, but there might be a Jamal that's way more qualified than me, and honestly. And that Michael won't get written off just based upon his name being Michael. So that's something that's really been implemented, and it needs to go away. There's no reason why people are getting written off just based upon their name.
I mean, going off of that, let's talk about redlining and let's get personal with it. The American dream says that you come over to these shores, you own a house, right? That's like the biggest staple, white picket fence, leave it to beaver type atmosphere, right? Within the black community for so long and generationally, we were barred from even owning our own homes and barred and boxed into just certain neighborhoods with low property values, right? The strength of a community is based on a property value. But let's say you actually own your home, right? So let's take my grandmother's house, for example, who lives in Linden on Holt Avenue. You own a house, but that house is not up to code, right? Because you don't have the economic background to actually build that up. Or if you can build up to a modern household, your neighborhood infrastructure can't support that house, right? So anyone who knows in Linden, if it rains, you're praying your basement don't flood because you understand that your sewage system for your street isn't up to code. And if anything, you want to go to the city and say, hey, my street, Holt Avenue, it's not up to code. Well, you're not due for a new sewage system till 2030. By 2030, I'm going to have kids, but you're telling me my grandmother's house that they bought in the 50s can't have adequate sewage system. But yet and still, you go to Clintonville, it's a whole different story, right? So economically, the way that the black community has been oppressed is financially, financial independence. The best way to build a community is through generational wealth, and the best way to build generational wealth is through land. If we don't have our own land, you can't build anything on that land, right? So I'm gonna get off track a little bit. My little sister and me were having a conversation yesterday, and she was like, well, why do I need to own land? If someone wants to come in and buy it from me, I'll just sell it to them. No. Own the land, lease the building, right? Too quick in the black community, we're told just sell, exactly. Right? Get out, right? Go to Dublin, go to New Albany. If you can get out, right? We need to start learning within our communities that if we can own the land and actually build up and build our communities, that's where you can begin to systematically deconstruct the institution of oppression, right? Even education, right? Look at public schools versus suburban schools, right? Governor DeWine, $300 million cut from Columbus City schools, and you have 31 schools in poverty-stricken highest ratings, right? But still, you go to Nolan Tange where you have maybe 1 or 2 high schools and a higher property value for higher property taxes, you can take that budget reduction. But Columbus Public Schools where you have 46,000 students, you can't handle that, exactly. Right? In a district that is mostly black people. So.
Most recently, you may have heard people calling to defund the police. In what ways do you think that the government can invest funding to improve the success of young boys and young men of color?
Well, first and foremost, we need to understand that the police, they're not the military. My father was a soldier, and the police are not the military, I promise you, not close enough. So all the money that's going towards, it goes towards things that can help, but all that money should not go into things that are tearing down the community more than it's uplifting the community, if that makes sense. But some groups that I would say just take a portion of it and put it towards Men on the Move, My Brother's Keeper, Big Brother, Big Sister. There's so many programs that will help the black youth, and not even the black youth, that will help the minorities all over Columbus. There's so many groups that will lift them up and help them. Also, if you go into it and you research, a lot of kids are not ready for kindergarten when it's time for them to go to kindergarten. The money that's going into the police system, some of that money could go towards helping them get ready to know how to write their name, know their ABCs before they get to kindergarten. Also, homelessness. Homelessness is a very big issue in Columbus, Ohio. And a lot of the money that's going into the police system, some of that money can go into finding houses, getting people stabilized. And the list can go on. The list can really go on. You guys know the issues that are going on in Columbus, and it's very big. And the thing is, we have the power to change it. And all over across America, every single police force, they have money to give. They don't need all that money. So we as the people need to stand up and say, take this money away and put it into things that will actually build the community up. If you guys don't want to build it up. My fault, you know.
No, go off. No, of course. I mean, I agree with that completely, right? Because when we look at when time for budget cuts, usually what's on the chopping block is education and social services, right? Better yet, let's take it back in the 80s, right? War on drugs, let's give more money to police, let's give a 1994 crime bill, and let's take that money away from, mental institutions, right? Let's take that money away from our public schools, let's take that money away from our after-school programs, right? So if I'm a young kid, I got nowhere to go after school. I'm hyper, but no one's really telling me how to control that, right? So if I'm hyper, they're saying, no, sit down. If I don't sit down, we have a police officer come in and just really put you down, right? So we really need to look at funding our social services and our educational systems, right? Primarily hiring minority teachers within our educational systems, right? So let's talk about kindergarten. I didn't have a black male teacher till I was in high school, and even that I only had one.
Never had a black
right?
male teacher until I went to a HBCU.
Exactly. Right? So if we're looking at our young black boy who's a 6-year-old who's trying to get his sight words ready, but his teacher doesn't understand that his home environment may not have the proper resources for that, how are we equipping our teachers in our educational system to deal with that, to make sure that they're ready for kindergarten? Exactly. Right? How are we investing into our social services to provide more extracurricular activities for our young black men? Right? So how are we exposing our young black youth to the opportunities that are around our city, right? So is the young kid in Linden knowing that there's a COSI? Is he going to that science center really understanding, like, hey, I can be a scientist, I can be, an astronaut, not just getting everything from a tube, right, or his phone. So yeah.
But the main thing that a lot of people look over, our teachers have been taking budget cuts for years. I mean, they get defunded so much when it's time to go in. They lose money. People, like teachers. So what's the difference between taking the money from somebody that's educating the youth and taking the money away from somebody that's enforcing the law? So there just has to be a balance between things.
Definitely reinvesting in the black community is always going to, build that generational wealth and bring those things with it. But after experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic and so many innocent people dying, how do you go back to school in the fall? How do you mentally prepare for that, to go back to school?
I mean, you got to ask yourself, what's the end goal, right? The end goal is to get your degree so you can come back and help your community, right? So my people aren't we're used to adversity, right? This isn't new to us. If you compare our experience right now to my great-grandparents, were like, okay, you're living through a 1919 Spanish flu pandemic, you got a world war going on, and I'm not a citizen, and I got people trying to lynch me, and I can still get a college education and raise a family and have kids and own my own land. I don't think we have a choice but to succeed because our ancestors have already paved the road for us to succeed, right?
At a point, you just have to look back and just, in my beliefs, you just have to look, at a point, you just have to have faith. Growing up in a Christian home, always remember, I know personally, I'm covered in the blood of my Lord, Jesus Christ. So no matter what goes on, no matter what happens, I just have to have faith that things are going to change. Things are going to be different. I'm not going to say it's going to happen immediately, but it's going to happen. I promise you that. So honestly, I'm just covered in the blood. So I'm straight. I'm good.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely taking time. Definitely will take some time. When you look at statistics, it shows third grade is the average to determine the success of youth. What types of programming should be implemented to ensure the success of young boys of color?
Ooh. You want this one?
I'll say. I mean, it's education and making sure that we're having sustained and continual learning, right? So we look at, let's take, for example, a private school versus a public school, right? That kindergarten in a private school, after they've learned their sight words, after they've learned, how to write their name, they're getting that big summer booklet and saying, all right, when you come back to the first grade, I need this entire booklet done to make sure that you're still on track to be in the first grade. We would go into our public schools, summer vacation, I'm just chilling. on TikTok with my big brothers and stuff, right? So we look at wanting investing in having required summer reading for our kindergartners and our first graders and our second graders, right? Building partnerships with metropolitan libraries to say, you know, okay, summer reading, make sure that every CCS student or public school student has a summer reading challenge, right? Because if you're a kid, it's like, okay, if I can get a prize, if I can get coupons, I can go to Zumbizi Bay or the zoo, like, yeah, I'll read this 20 minutes for you, like, right? Implementing interventions for, you know, those third and fourth graders who may not be on grade level, right? So let's take it for mental health. If I understand that, you know, you have ADHD or that you have depression or that you have anxiety, I'm going to implement an intervention to make sure you get well. Why aren't we doing the same with education? I'm not just going to let you fail and say, okay, well, you didn't make it this year, Mike. I'm gonna still take you to the fifth grade. It's cool. You'll be fine. You didn't make it fifth grade. I'm gonna take you to the sixth grade, right? I'm in high school and I'm still having classmates who can't read on grade level. Then why are we putting them in that situation to fail, right? That school to prison pipeline. As soon as we see a problem, we need to address that problem and solve that problem, right?
First off, yeah, you did that. But a big thing is we have to look about their homes. A lot of third grade students go through traumatic homes. They don't know, and they come to school and then they have to learn. And then they have to do good on tests. While at home, I'm just gonna go raw. Their parents are suffering from drug addiction. Their father is beating their mom. The things can go on. So we have to implement family stabilization plan. There should be a family stabilization plan. Get their parents jobs. I mean, because some of their parents, they don't have jobs, and since education is mandatory at that age, they don't have the needs to provide for their student. Get them good meals so that they can go to school in the morning, ready to learn. So we have to implement that. Also, we should implement mentoring programs off the gate. Like there should be somebody that when a third grader walks into school, I look up to him. I want to hear what he has to say in order for me to have success, and that mentor pushes them to success, sits down, reads to them, talks about their life, because you don't know what a third grader in inner city Columbus could be going through. And the thing is, we overlook them just based upon, oh, they're a kid, they'll grow out of it. But sometimes they don't grow out of it, and that could be traumatic for their entire life. So we have to implement familiarization programs and mentor programs at that age.
And even going off of that, making sure that our parents know that they're building a partnership with their local schools to uplift their children, right? So let's say even your parents aren't on drugs, right? They don't have any mental problems, but you know, your mom is working 9 to 5, right? Your dad is, let's take my example. My mother's a full-time college professor. My father's a pilot. My youngest sibling, Michelle, is the youngest of 4 children. So my parents are already very well spent, very well organized on how they're spending their time as a parent and also juggling their work life, right? So how is the school and government really coming in and help that third grader say, okay, if your parent is bogged down with this, how are we helping that parent succeed, right? Or do we have a local PTA that's bringing in the Scholastic Book Fair to help you get up to that third grade reading level, right? Are we having that local PTA or that local parental group taking you on exposure field trips to, you know, the boathouse, right? So you can see what Columbus really has to offer, and it's not just, you know, the kids in New Albany that come to the boathouse, right? So how are we actually building that partnership between our schools and our parents to build that trust to actually help that child succeed? And that's where we really need to bring back in funding our educational system and our social services system, right?
Definitely, keeping our kids engaged and attacking the problem where it starts is, you know, one of our biggest goals. But Andrew, in this current moment, how do you think youth can get involved to affect policy or make change?
Get into organizations and join organizations that give you the opportunity and the seat to actually have leadership roles and positions. That's my biggest way for youth to get involved. So for example, Worth Foundation, right? It's a nonprofit that I co-founded back in 2016. Why? President Trump was elected, and a lot of my peers were like, well, why did that happen? We learned in school there's a popular vote and an electoral vote, but Hillary won the popular, but Trump won the electoral. Like, how does that work? How does my vote matter? So there's this disconnect in youth really understanding how to actually make policy, right? So we need to actually have organizations that say, okay, Eddie, you're 16, you want to learn how to actually create policy. Let me come over here and teach you how to, talk with a local official, right? Too quick, we're very quick to protest, right? That's just one facet of making change. We need to learn how to make policy, move from protest to policy, right? That's what we really need to do. And having local organizations like our Metropolitan Club, like our NAACP, like our Urban League, recruit our youth, right? So going into schools and saying, yeah, our stuff didn't stop in the 60s. We're still here. Like Dr. King may be watching us, but we're still doing the work, right? So recruiting at a very young age into these organizations that equip you with the leadership skills that when you are mayor of Columbus or when you are chief of police, you're not just learning quick on the job. Like, no, I've been doing this. I know how to write an agenda. I know Robert's rules. Like, what's up? Let's do this,
100% agree. To the vantage point of, if you look at the change that's going on right now, I'm going to be totally honest. If the protests and everything did not happen, I highly doubt that those police officers would have been arrested, convicted so quickly, just based upon the change. So when you ask, what can youth do? I'm going to be honest. I feel like the youth are involved. When you go out to the street, you see their faces. You don't see 40-year-old men out there leading everything. You see people that look just like me, my age, 19 years old, standing 2 feet, looking into the eyes of the, I'm not even gonna call them the enemy, of the people that do not have mental composition of what's going on, or that they're blinded by their own greed, to the point that I feel like the youth, 100%, they need to get involved into these organizations immediately, not later down the line when they're 23, 24. No, you need to start now, because if you know it, then that can protect you for a lifetime. So yeah, I feel like they're involved, but they're gonna get more involved, because it's definitely, something's gonna click. I just have a feeling that something's gonna click in everybody's mind, and something's really about to change.
I think it's already clicking for us, though,
Yeah.
right? So the biggest tester is November, right? Vote, right? So I'm gonna call it right now. You're gonna see a higher voter registration for new voters,
Exactly.
right? Because now it's like, okay, I'm seeing people marching in the streets, but people are telling me to vote. Okay, I'll vote. But then what happens after that? I click a box for someone I don't know who's in Washington, but how are you helping my own community? Join local organizations. You're protesting, great.
Right.
But what happens after that protest, right? We're quick to fill out a Google form and email our local official, but no, talk to that local
Exactly.
official, right? If we have a board member in a room, go talk to that board member. Don't just be so quick to say, these are my demands. Yeah, list those demands, but then actually know, okay, why can't we implement these demands? Well, there's a police union. Well, why do we have a police union? Well, because they want to negotiate and have a good contract. Okay, well, how can we implement that contract that is equitable for all of our citizens of Columbus, right? Too soon, we just see the public facing of a governmental agency. No, we need to know what actually goes on behind the scenes, right, of a bureaucracy, right? And that's where you really get into the mindset of moving from a protest to policy. And youth are doing it.
And a very big thing is we have a lot of important people in the room right now. We have a lot of important people. And I'm gonna challenge everybody in this room. Do not just tell young people, if you know somebody that is eligible to register to vote, I challenge you to give them the raw answers of why they should vote. Don't just say you should vote. Because it gets blinded to a point where it's just like, I've heard, I was gonna register, I already registered and everything like that, but it just goes to a point when I'm not with my parents. People come up to me and like, are you registered to vote? Explain to me why. Like, I'm just saying, like, my generation, you just gotta be raw. I'm gonna just be honest with you. You have to be raw. And also, to the very important people in the room, because you guys are all very, very important, it's time to have that conversation. It's time to have that raw intellectual conversation with our young people. Cause that's what's not getting through sometimes, is that like they need raw answers and raw judgment and raw everything. Like, don't sugarcoat anything, cause life's never gonna sugarcoat at all. It never will, because it'll hit you, and it'll hit you hard. But the thing is, we need to be prepared to get back up and make things change.
And bring them to the table, too. So like Mike was saying, we got elected officials in here. Why can't you establish a youth internship to actually teach them those skills, right? If I know that we have a Board of Education member or a Franklin County treasurer in here, okay, how are we preparing our youth in, let's say, high school You want to go to law school, I want to go to law school, you want to become a surgeon, right? How are we preparing those youth? Okay, so when you do go to college, I know how to write an agenda. I know how to make a budget, right? I know how to balance a budget, right? So how are we using our governmental agencies to prepare to give that baton off to the next generation, right? Because trust, if we're not in the room, we'll bring a folding table and sit down at the table for you. Trust.
I definitely agree with that. We're now going to open up the questions to the audience. We're going to take questions from our live stream and our live viewers. But while we do that, just one more question for you guys. Do you think the change that is happening right now is real? Is it lasting? Or do you think it's something that's going to kind of push off and, move along?
Oh, I'm going to be totally honest with you. My generation, this generation, they have the foot on the gas and they're not letting up. When I promise you, to the depth of my heart and my soul, this is not going anywhere. This is here to stay until we actually see some change. Cause I mean, it's always, people's timelines might have changed right back, but I promise you, Black lives still matter, and they will forever matter, no matter what. So I promise, to this day, to the end of my lifetime, this is gonna keep going, cause we're gonna keep pushing until something changes, and that's for sure. I promise you.
Oh, this feels like a real conversation, y'all. Change is like President Obama said, it's never be in a straight line. It may zig and zag, but ultimately we're gonna get there. And my biggest faith for our generation is that we are so focused on so many areas and putting our energies into changing so many things, is that I'm excited for 2050. Like, trust. We have climate change, Greta Thunberg, and 14-year-olds rallying the world to have better climate controls, right? We have youth in Columbus and all over the nation really saying, yeah, Black lives do matter, criminal justice, let's get this stuff going. We have March for Our Lives saying, yeah, guns and our schools are not things that should be going together, right? We have Malala Yousafzai, I apologize for her name, Malala, right? Making sure that education is a fundamental right for our entire world, right? So you're seeing all across all these areas, youth who aren't in elected positions, mind you, who don't have the power of the purse, who don't control the funding, still making these grand changes and really changing the minds of the adults, right? So if we're doing this now, wait until we actually are in City Hall. Wait till we're actually in the White House and the Capitol building. Like, trust, it's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
And that is real power right there, where the youth comes in. We're going to take our first question from the audience right here. How are you, ma'am?
Hello, Renee Delane from Women Who Dare. First of all, I would contest what you said about the VIPs, because you three are the badass VIPs. Okay. My question is actually two parts. Who would you choose for the VP, assuming Biden will win? And then if you could have your dream team of a president and vice president, who are the two people you would choose?
That's you.
Is CNN watching? I don't want to. At least for VP, I know Vice President Biden is stating that he wants a woman of color for that. My biggest thing when you get into a position is, are you experienced to actually use that position to its fullest capabilities? For that, I know that Kamala Harris are being mentioned, Susan Rice are being mentioned, two of which are very intelligent and capable professionals. And I would really lean towards those two because, for one, Susan Rice knows, as a former ambassador to the I would say UN and also in the National Security Council, how Washington works, and also Kamala Harris being a former prosecutor from California and knowing how our Senate works, can actually know how to move the levers of government for that, right? So someone with a criminal justice background like Kamala Harris, who knows how Washington works, because too soon we're very quick to have someone just say, okay, you have these great ideas, but if you come in, you're like an Obama and you're stonewalled by the opposing party, and you don't really know how to politic to get your initiatives through, we're going to hit a wall, right? And your second part was my dream team for Obama first. I mean, come on. I mean, he's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's obvious.
It's obvious. I mean, and then as a VP, I mean, I would go with Lyndon Johnson, primarily because if you look at how he was able, as a Southerner.
You said everything I was going to say.
I mean, if you look at how, as a Southerner, like, yeah, I can really just politic and actually negotiate and bargain to get a Civil Rights Act through. in a very highly polarized time and know how to move the levers of government, that's a dream team right there. And
Yeah.
plus, he's good at that shot.
I'm gonna be totally honest. He just took everything I was about to say. So he got me. He got me. He took everything I was about to say. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you, Branch, for the both of us. Thank you, Branch, for the both of us.
I'm amazed at how knowledgeable you guys are. Fabulous. My name's Jane Scott, and I'm asking a question for some folks who sent some things in online. And I have a lot of questions. I'm going to ask some that haven't really been covered yet. A woman named Loya Hazel from Cardinal Health. I'm a Mexican immigrant who is having a hard time explaining to my family the oppression of black citizens in America. My family does not believe in such oppression since they have never dealt with obvious racism in their extremely Latino hometown. How can we best teach my own minority community about these racism issues, even though we've never experienced them directly, this kind of direct, abrupt racism?
That's a great question. That's actually a very great question. I'm going to go back into, we're going to go into the dictionary a little bit. We're going to go to sympathy and empathy. So you can sympathize for me, but that means you have pity for me. I don't want you to have pity for me. But you can have empathy and you feel where I'm coming from. You understand what's going on. Everybody needs to have an understanding. I would challenge them to actually just go on Netflix. Watch When They See Us. Watch 13. What else? There's so many things that you could watch. Actually, The Color Purple. Go on Twitter and just look at it and just come out of your shoes and put yourself in the shoes of others and watch how that leads you and watch how that really brings you into the table. Like, I wouldn't want this to happen to myself. And this has been going on for hundreds of years for black folks. So it just goes into the mindset of 100%, I don't want this to happen to me, and I see what they're going through. I should most definitely have empathy and be like, 100%, we need to change, because I would never want this to happen to myself. So, just gonna keep it hot. Sure.
Good afternoon, guys. Thanks for being here today. My name is Mike Carmichael L. Brands, and I'm a VIP, but, whatever. To Andrew's point earlier about letting kids know they can have a career as a police officer one day, I think that's important. Michael's point about coming from a military family, one thing I see, and I wanted to get your opinion about it, is that we bring former military people in to police.
Exactly.
There is no buffer. There is no de-escalation of what I faced in wartime to dealing with civilians. There's a lot of PTSD going on, and I've experienced myself. I'm like, why are they so
Exactly.
in your face? And I'm not black.
Right.
I don't get it. So when you're talking about on the street, off the street, I think there needs to be a time frame when they get hired to say, we need to do something about making sure you understand your new audience.
Right.
Your comments.
Right. 100% agree with that. Based upon the 6 months, I didn't really get into it because I don't really want to over-explain everything. But my implemented plan for the 6 months on the street, 6 months off the street, 100% will go into the background of we need to have actually counseling services, because counseling services are really big, because we don't really know, our police officers, at the end of the day, they are people. They are human beings. They do have minds. And the thing is, we need to talk to them. We need to have the conversation with them about, are you really ready? And there are tests implemented to even make sure that they are ready to even go on the street, actually deal with somebody that's 12 years old. Because I promise you, somebody that just came from war has no business walking. I'm looking at the streets right now. It has no business just walking up the street with a gun on the side, talking about no, don't do that. What are you doing? Why are you moving? They run. Done. It just doesn't make sense. So definitely, I understand. 100%.
I have one question here. Are black young men anxious?
Explain.
With anxiety? Will you live with fear and anxiety?
I have a question for the whole entire audience. How many of you have had to talk with your parents about how to deal with a police officer? Be honest. Just be honest. Who has had the conversation about what do you do at a traffic stop? How do you do everything like that? I want everybody to just look around at the room. Just look around at the room and look at the hands. Majority of those people are African Americans. So you can really see, it's not, I'm not gonna say anxious, but it's just like, you just come to an agreement of like, why should my mom have to kiss me on my forehead every single time I have to go to the field to go play football? Cause she doesn't know if I'm gonna get stopped at a stoplight, and that could be the end of my life forever, and she loses her son. Because I promise you, I know Joy Bivens, she'll set this whole world on fire for this one. So it just goes to a thing of just like, you just gotta look at things at a certain aspect of just like, some stuff just didn't happen. Like, why should I be afraid of the person that's trying to help me?
Thanks, gentlemen. Andrew, you mentioned the importance of community building and getting to know people, and one sensitive topic recently has been police officers in schools, serving as these school resource officers. And many people say, well, that's the police trying to build a relationship with young people and students. So what are your thoughts about school resource officers and the role they play or should play?
Let me preface this, but these views are completely mine and do not reflect anything of Columbus City Schools. Let me just say that first and foremost. I do believe that police officers in schools, they need to have a sustained role in building that trust. So for example, if I look at my own personal experience at Columbus Alternative High School, the police officer there was simply patrolling the hallways, not really interacting with the students. You would maybe just see her sitting at lunch and just looking at you and having a really authoritarian figure with that. So if we do have police in schools, give them a role, right? So if we're gonna be building that community trust, teach a class. Like, actually get to know me and how I actually operate, right? So teaching students, okay, as a police officer, this is how the police system works, right? I'm not just here on my wherewithal. If we're gonna have police officers outside of school, making sure that we have safety officials in the schools that are equipped to handle the modern dangers of a 21st century school, right? So if we see many people who are advocating for, well, why do we have police officers in schools? And last time you were in school was in like 1962. Things have changed since then. So we've had a Columbine, we've had a Parkland, we've had a Sandy Hook, right? So I see why there's an argument for police officers in schools for protection, of course, yeah, because I don't want to give a teacher a gun. But we got to make sure that that police officer has a role and actually has in their job description, okay, if you're going to be in a school, we need to, be cleared to be in that school by a licensed counselor, so that you're not just immediately throwing somebody down if they're routing in the school. We need to make sure that your department actually has an equity policy for how to treat students within a school. We need to make sure that those police officers are equipped to know that, okay, if I'm dealing with a child, that's very, very different than me dealing with a 34-year-old drug dealer, right? So, yeah.
So Catherine Glenn Applegate from Action for Children asks, what is the #1 change you would like to see in Columbus, Ohio?
The biggest change I want to see in Columbus, Ohio, probably would be more elected officials that represent the fabric of Columbus as a whole, right? Because we understand that the biggest changes from Columbus come from our elected officials, but also our local businesses, right? So if I can make this a little like a two-parter. More youth elected officials, but also more minority-owned small businesses, right? Because we understand that green is the most important color if we're talking about colors, right? So if we can build our Bhutanese communities, that's going to be great. If we can build our Somali communities, that can be great. If we can build our Black communities, that can be great, right? So as Columbus is an opportunity city that we're calling it, is an opportunity city for all.
Hi, my name is Debbie Matthews. I happen to have the good fortune of having a great nephew who happens to be Black. He came out to Bowling Green from Massachusetts to play football. He had a job there as a bouncer in a bar. 2 white men got into a fight. He broke it up. The police were called, and guess who they arrested? The Black guy. Fortunately, I have a son who's an attorney, and he was able to get good representation that my niece probably could not have afforded. He now is working in Columbus for my youngest son, and we are so happy to have him with us here. So all is well now. So,
All in the family.
thank you.
Joshua Mitchell from The Ohio State University. You guys are doing a great job. Play on. I'm excited to see you at OSU in the fall. The issue of racial justice has been politicized and oftentimes compartmentalized. The loudest voices in the room regarding racial injustice are normally black, or if the conversation has been politicized, the loudest voices are normally from the liberal side or from the left. So what do you say to people who feel that racism is not their problem because they're neither black nor liberal? How do you address people who don't think racial injustice is their problem?
I mean, black people, in terms of social justice movements in this nation and fighting racism, are the vanguard for social progress regardless, right? And I'm going to bring it home to you real quick. We just had a Supreme Court decision that made it illegal for someone to fire you if you're lesbian, gay, transgender, or bisexual, LGBTQ+A. The legal basis for that was the 1964 Civil Rights Movement, the 1964 Civil Rights Bill, excuse me, right? So trust, in the 60s, they weren't thinking about Stonewall. They weren't thinking about our gay community, but trust and believe, 50, 60 years later, we're still using the achievements of my ancestors to provide social progress for other social minorities and inequalities and groups, right? So the fact that you can say racism doesn't affect you is, I'm not gonna say, it's very ignorant. It's very ignorant, right? Because we know that if in my fight for progress, black people, trust Fred Hampton, I'm gonna bring along my white people, I'm gonna bring along my Native Americans, I'm gonna bring along my LGBTQ+A to actually make sure that this society is equitable and just for everyone, right? Racism is just the tipping point. There's a whole diaspora of social issues that black people want to fight for, and racism is just one of them.
Let me go. It goes back to what I said earlier. It goes based upon sympathy and empathy. So you can have sympathy for me, don't have sympathy for me, because that's pity. I don't want your pity. But to a point, you have to look at it at a point of come out of your shoes, come out of your fancy house, come out of your comfortable. You have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I promise you, in this time period, it's been going on forever. So, I mean, you're always going to have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable because that's how you see change. So you have to come out of your shoes, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and actually look at it of a fact of if it was flipped, how would you feel? Would you want the black community to be like, that don't mean nothing to me. I don't want nothing to do with that. You would most definitely want their help to stand up and make a change, not just for themselves, but for the whole entire world, for the whole entire system.
Better, yeah. Even with that, what we see largely in our society is that you love black culture, but you don't love black people, right? That's what it is at the end of the day. So if I go to a New Albany, yeah, I'm gonna see some people with some Jordans and some LeBrons on, but let's go to Linden real quick and let's go shoot some hoops over at Woodward Park. I bet you will see a very, very stark difference, right? You got the new Meek Mill, other side of America, you listen to all the words, but I can't say the N-word. Well, why can't I say the N-word?
Yeah, 100%. Like, don't look at, like, okay, so I'm an athlete. Always been an athlete. But the thing is, don't love me when I'm on the field. Love me when I'm off the field. So when I'm over here making the tackles, getting the interceptions, everything for you to cheer, for you to be like, oh, go team, go team. But when I'm off the field and I got my hand up and I'm saying Black Lives Matter, I 100% want you to be behind me and say, Black Lives Matter.
All right. Plan, I think we're gonna, right. Thank you, everyone. I don't, Annie, good? One more question? No? Okay, sorry. Sorry. All right.
offering your insights. One of the things that I've noticed through the years for me as a white man is that racism, structural racism and oppression and white supremacy is it's not a black problem, it's not a people of color problem, it's actually a white problem. And what I would say is where I work at the medical center, we're trying to launch some things about examining white people's part in this and how it is an interlocking system that actually will punish you if you try to give up privilege, how deeply it runs, how it's embedded in our head in those waters that we swim in. This is my first meeting here. I came because of the programming and I joined. I'm kind of interested in maybe using the connections here as a networking opportunity to maybe start a process where white people, in a way to keep ourselves honest, engages with some material like the book White Fragility. There's a podcast called Seeing White, and it's about really examining whiteness as the force that drives all this. My name is Brian McMichael. I work at the medical center, but I'll talk to anybody later about that.
A big thing I would like to see, the only way to beat racism is to challenge it any way you see it. It doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, green, blue, everything. The only way to defeat racism is by challenging it anytime you see it. So that doesn't mean just because I challenge it, doesn't mean you can't challenge it. Doesn't mean you can't challenge it. That's the only way we're going to beat this is if everybody collectively challenges it.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was really enlightening. Audience, thank you for the great questions. You know, we started today, my remarks included words like complicated, complex. The three of you were able to lay out some really actionable, thoughtful solutions to the problems that we're facing. And you've simplified things in a way that I think is really valuable for people to consider. It remains difficult, but you've given me a lot of optimism on a path forward. And working at Ohio State, we've gone through lots of diversity trainings, implicit bias trainings, and we've paid a lot of money for that type of consulting. And for $25 today, I got a real education on some solutions and an even better deal for our virtual audience. So thank you for your thoughtful comments today. On July 15th, we will welcome young black women to the stage to hear their perspective on these issues as well. We hope you will tune in next Wednesday at noon online or in person here at the Boathouse as we discuss the social determinants of health with Bo Chilton, CEO of Impact Community Action, and Dr. Olewola, Chair of the Department of Family Medicine at Ohio State. We are grateful for our live stream partners, WOSU Public Media, PNC, Dispatch Media Group, and our online virtual seat patrons. Thank you very much. And special thanks again to our speakers, Michael Bivens, Andrew Pierce II, Playon Patrick. Thank you very much. We hope to see you in person soon, but until then, be well, stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you.